Mabuhay. How is everyone today? I tell you what, it's super hard to follow somebody like Gary, and he's doing that at 4 in the morning. So, but it is such a privilege to be with you today. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen. I have a presentation I put together. It's a big topic that they've asked me to discuss. So I want to try to make sure that we're able to get through it all in the time allowed. Let's see here. So let's see, is my screen not working? Okay, come on. There we go. Well, like I said, I'm Randy Kennedy. I've been doing this particular role with McClellan for the last 16 years. That's my team. We're across all of South and Southeast Asia. And our mission is really very simple to understand. And we use this metaphor of a suspension bridge to help explain what McClellan Foundation is seeking to have happen. It's very much in alignment with what Gary just talked about, which is the idea that we want to see sustainable kingdom growth. And we define that as local strategies that grow the local church funded locally. What we've observed around the world is a dynamic which is creating a dependency where local people say, we don't have enough, we need funds from outside our country for the church to grow. And based on what Gary's just shared, based on our own experience, we know that that's not necessarily the case. There is a role for the global church to play, but it shouldn't be the primary role in each nation. So this simple diagram of a suspension bridge illustrates what we think are two big areas of focus for the foundation. When you think about a suspension bridge, when you build one of those, you build from each bank of the river and it meets in the middle. So in this particular illustration, on the left side of the bridge, you see the local ministries. These are the indigenous work. These are the folks that are seeking to reach their own people and are doing that through all kinds of ministry outlets. On the right side are the people in that same nation who have resources, people who have work in companies, who are entrepreneurs, who are farmers, people across the spectrum that have something to give. What we've seen is that there's often a gap in this bridge to where local resources are not flowing to the local ministry. And likewise, the local ministry is not in effective relationship and communication with those people with local resources. So our bridge strategy is designed to help close that gap, to provide tools and resources and strategies to help connect the two sides of the bridge so that we have a very healthy, sustainable kingdom growth in every nation of the world. So that's the high-level idea. A little bit about McClellan. We have a passion for biblical generosity. We have actually from the very beginning. Our foundation's rather old, goes back 164 years to a gentleman named Thomas McClellan, who, when he was only 21 years old, wrote a letter to the Lord, coveting, promising him that he would take all of his worldly possessions and all of his influence to grow the Great Commission. So far, and then about 20 years ago, we launched something called Generous Giving in the United States. And since then, we've launched a number of other organizations and also helped a number of other organizations walk in this role of generosity around the world. Here's a little example, and this is actually based on real research. From 2012 to 2018, we did a study and we looked at what's the difference, what difference does a message of generosity make? And this is a graphic of people who have their money in something called the National Christian Foundation. And the light blue color you see there is what you would consider a control group. These are people that did not receive the message of generosity. The dark blue are the people who heard the message of generosity. And you can see a rather significant difference in giving between those that understood the message of generosity and those that did not. So we believe this is a message the church needs to hear. And this is a message for everyone to hear, not just the wealthy and not just the poor, but everyone needs to hear this message of generosity, which is really God's heart for his people. It's a simple message and it's a simple strategy that we're pursuing. We want to catalyze a global movement of biblical generosity among all believers. And this little graphic here is a very simple way to understand that. We want to see the number of people reached. We want to increase that number with the message of generosity. We want to see hearts changed, and we want to see money released. Now, there's lots of ways to be generous. You can be generous with your time. You can be generous with your where you live or where you work. You can be generous with many things. But what we think the real indicator of hearts change is actually generous with what you have, with you, like Gary talked about, whether it's cash, or if it's corn, maize, or if it's rice, or if it's whatever you have. In the handful of rice video, one of my favorite parts is where the pastor says, if we have something to eat, we have something to give. And we think that's the message the church needs to better understand as it grows around the world. So I'm supposed to talk about how we promote generosity through partnership. This little graphic is intended to help you get a picture of all the things we're involved in. If you look at the vertical, the up and down, the left side is the global church, the broader church, and the right side are the more affluent people in the resourcing side. On the left side, on the broader church, we have a tool that we've developed called Stations of Generosity. It's designed for the broad church, for everyone in the church. It's a simple message. It's biblical based. It's based on scripture alone. Do video stories if you want to. You can also act them out. It works with all kinds of people who can read, people who are oral only, and everything in the middle. And then on the bottom, so that's what we offer. It's a product, actually, a tool that the McClellan Foundation developed. Then below that, you'll see we have partnerships. So you're hearing from several today. Generous Church, Patrick's coming along a little bit later. We just heard from Gary with Global Trust Partners. And also Generosity Path, which is the one who provides the journey of generosity that Zenet mentioned early on. Then on the right-hand side, we have things targeting specifically people who have a lot of resources. And so we have something called a Kingdom Giving Collaboration, which I'll mention briefly, is gathering together people who have means to help them strategize together and motivate one another to give toward the big needs of their nation. We've seen those popping up all over the world. We've also got something called McClellan Giving Partners, where projects and ministries that we fund, we make them aware of, and they also can participate in that giving. And then on the bottom, we also fund, you'll see that Generous Giving and Generosity Path fall on both sides of this spectrum. Also, a few other organizations that focus on wealthy people. This idea of a giving collaboration, I think, is a powerful idea. That's the idea that people come together and together strategize and do their own research and their own resourcing to give to the work of the church in their region. Here's an example in Romania. Now, it wasn't that long ago that Romania was considered one of the poorest, most difficult places in the world to live under communist rule. This past year, Romanian business people gathered together and gave 200,000 euros from Romania to the local churches in Romania and the local mission projects in Romania. This is possible in every country. We believe this can happen in the Philippines. We believe this can happen in places like Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, India, all these places. So that's part of our dream, is to see these giving collaborations form around the world. Kind of a smaller or a different expression of what McClellan's doing on a global basis. Now, a little bit about Stations of Generosity. Like I said, this is a tool we developed. It's available free of charge. It is in a Creative Commons license, so you can take it and translate it. You can modify it. You can do anything you like with it. But its purpose primarily is to set free people from a poverty mindset and the prosperity gospel. We really think of it as an antidote to the prosperity gospel, and also help take away this over-reliance on foreign funds and quit looking outside of your area, but instead look within what you've got, so that you can really become generous within your framework. We've done a number of studies to verify that this is an effective message. And what we've seen is that the poor will start self-identifying as generous and will faithfully give. I think this is what Gary just shared with the handful of Mays. You saw the joy on the faces of those people as they contributed to the work of the kingdom. We believe this is powerful. And when you run the numbers, there are places where there are literally millions of people in the church that, if they all just gave a little, would make a huge difference into the growth of the church. This is a little bit about Stations of Generosity. There are 7 principles that are communicated through the Stations of Generosity. God owns everything. God provides enough. God gave generously. We, as his people, respond lovingly. We listen to God. We hear what he says. We find joy in giving, and we store up our treasures in heaven, not on earth. So that's the basic concept around the Stations of Generosity message. Now, I believe Pastor Nono is going to talk a bit about what's happening in the Philippines and the journey of generosity, so I'm not going to spend any time on that right now. We did a research project based on this work in India with Stations of Generosity, and a couple of the findings I thought were important to share. One is that even among the poor, Stations of Generosity is catalyzing the release of financial resources. We saw that people were creating an active, intentional posture towards giving. Rather than reactive and passive, they began to plan ahead and intentionally give to things they felt the Lord was leading them to give to. So we saw deliberate acts of generosity. We also saw people changing how they live, a lifestyle change, so that they could free up money so they could give. So instead of whatever's left over, if they have anything left over, now they're actually shaping their lives around being able to give towards God's kingdom. We think that's a powerful illustration of the message of generosity in the heart of people. Finally, my last slide is just to give you a sense of what's available now. So Stations of Generosity now has already had over 24,000 people go through the process. It's only been out about a year, and it has so far been translated into 61 languages. There's a website called stationsofgenerosity.org. You can go there. It's all free. You can download it. We have training materials, and this is something that CSA is able to do, teach on Stations of Generosity, along with most of our partners. So that's all the time I have. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you today.